An ancient occult legend that tells the story of a continent somewhere in the North Atlantic. There lived a race of super beings who had fallen from grace through evil and vice. The land was called Atlantis. A great flood wiped these beings off the face of the earth. But before they could all be destroyed, certain priests escaped by boat. These escaped priests, believed by mystics to be the original race of Aryan godmen, who were said to be the ancestors of all Indian and European people, descended from the super beings of Atlantis, and that they had lost their powers by mating with mere mortals. The Nordic race did not evolve, but came directly down from heaven to settle on the Atlantic continent. Ancient immigrants from Atlantis had founded a great civilization
in the high Himalayas. Here, survivors of the last cosmic catastrophe took shelter. This is the true cradle of the Aryan race.
In the eyes of many Nazis, Atlantis was the mythical homeland of the Aryan race. They thought that they would be tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed.
The Aryans, a mythical and superior race, had invented everything of value in human history, from agriculture to architecture, the creation of theater, and fine art. This great Aryan culture came to life thousands of years ago, an island continent they believed existed in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. To find a trace of these ancestors, the Nazis trained their sights on the Canary Islands, off the coast of Africa.
They saw this as being sort of the southern edge of this sort of mythical Atlantean continent. And they also were really kind of focused on accounts of mummies that had been found on the Canary Islands that had kind of blonde hair.
The mummies had been examined. They claimed the blonde-haired mummies were proof that Atlanteans had once lived on the Canary Islands. And most importantly, they were Aryans. Now that they had proof of an Atlantean fatherland, the Nazi scientists concocted an even more bizarre theory to explain its destruction and disappearance. It was called the world ice theory. As the ice melted, these massive glaciers receded. Atlantis was simply scrubbed away, buried under the water. But what happened to the people?
The inhabitants of Atlantis, according to this theory, then fled to various areas that were thought to be safe refuges. They would flee to Tibet, they would flee to the Bolivian Andes.
My name is Stoll, Axel Stoll. I'm a doctor of natural sciences. I'm familiar with all natural sciences and look at the problems in its entirety. Are you also Aryan? Yes, of course. I'm of Germanic heritage, that's all. My father was a military officer and volunteered to the SS during World War II. He was obligated to have an Aryan certificate. It's interesting, almost everyone was in the military, and your family had to have an Aryan certificate. Yes, my father, of course, all military personnel. And that's the reason why I'm quite knowledgeable in military technology. Here's the German flying saucers, developments as you can see. These are the early models, saucer models 1, 2, and 3. And these are the Haunebu flying saucers, different models. Haunebu, yes, the name Haunebu, Hauneber. It's of Germanic origin. There's a swastika painted on it, yes, on the initial ones. The moon is populated, Mars is populated by Nazis, and a few more planets. Probably also several other fixed star systems, but that's a guess. But that would mean that the moon and Mars is inhabited by Nazis? Yes, that's correct. The backside of the moon. Have you seen a UFO? Yes, several. Where? Here in the area of Berlin. Several. They perform vigorous aerial maneuvers. The movement, zack, zack, zack. And they're piloted by the Aryans? Yes, that's correct. So where did the Aryans come from? Presumably, but I can't prove it, from Aldebaran. From that star system. From the star system of the head of the Taurus, 68 light years away. With effects faster than light, it's only a short hop. So the Aryans basically weren't born on this planet? No, not born on this Earth. Well, there was also so-called Vril Society in the Third Reich, and they had telepathic contact to Aldebaran with the Vril women, mediums. What about the wisdom of the Aryans? Are they more intelligent? How high is their IQ? High, very high. Were there also black people on Aldebaran? No. This planet is a prison planet. Probably the most famous contactee case was the one involving Betty and Barney Hill, an American couple who claimed they were abducted in a rural portion of the state of New Hampshire, where under hypnosis, Barney Hill not only described the alleged extraterrestrials as looking like an Irishman, but he used the word Nazi, saying that the occupants of the craft were Nazis.
You say there, did you say it was 1,000 feet away?
Oh no.
1,000 yards?
It doesn't look that far. It's very big. And it's not that far. And I can see it tilted toward me.
Tilted? What does it look like now when you say tilted? Did you see wings?
Looks like a big pancake with windows and rows of windows and lights of not light, just one huge light. And
rows of windows like a commercial plane?
Rows of windows. They're not like a commercial plane because they curve around to the size of this pancake. One person looks friendly. He's friendly looking, and he's looking at me over his right shoulder, and he's smiling.
Could you see him clearly?
Yes, I thought.
What's his face like? What does it make you think of?
It's round. I think of a red-haired Irishman. And
you saw him through this window, or you said there was a row of windows?
It was a row of windows. Just a huge row of windows. And the evil face on he looks like a German Nazi.
He is a Nazi. Did he have on a uniform?
Yes.
What kind of uniform?
It was black.
Staffordshire's had a whole crop of flying saucers. Spots in the sky, lights in the sky, strange things. But the strangest of all was seen one day over this cottage. Mr. and Mrs. Rustenberg were living there, quietly, out in the country. And, well, you just tell me what you saw.
Well, it was one ordinary day. I was waiting for my husband to come home from work, and my two sons went to Sepehr to school, and I was getting changed, and I heard this terrific noise. It was just like a giant cauldron of water being poured onto a fire, a shh sort of noise, you know. And my first reaction was, oh, the children. I thought maybe a plane was crashing or something like that. And I slipped my jumper on and went outside to find my two sons lying flat on the ground in the garden in front of the house, shouting, "Mummy, Mummy, there's a flying saucer." Well, naturally, I just said, come on, don't be stupid. Come in the house. But felt sort of a strange sensation. Wended my way up the side of the house to where we had a pump where we used to get all our water from, and automatically looked up to see this, all I can describe, this huge Mexican hat. It was stationary, this thing, and it was bright silver in colour, and it had a dome. It was tilted to sort of, I could see the occupants in it.
You saw people in it?
I saw people in it. There were 2 people in there. These people were beautiful people. That's the only way I can describe them. They had long golden hair, like a page boy bob, just like the old kings. You used to see photographs of the old kings. And the colour of the hair was golden. Now, I was really...
What were they dressed in?
They had a sort of a polo neck jumper affair, like a ski top suit, in pale blue. Now, these people weren't sat behind, one behind the other. They were sat together, but this, whatever it was tilted so that I could see them and they could see me.
Were you looking at them through windows, through portholes, or what?
No, not portholes. It was just sort of like a cockpit, I suppose, that had this perspex or glass or whatever it was. They could see me anyway, and I could see them. And they had beautiful faces. I shall never forget their faces as long as I live. Their foreheads seemed to be a bit larger than, you know, the bottom of their faces as normal people you would expect to see. But maybe this was just whatever they had round their heads, which was like a transparent fishbowl. And they just looked, and I was absolutely paralytic with fear. I couldn't move, although my mind was ticking over. And they looked so sympathetic that I was just mesmerized for what seemed to be, ages, but it could have only been seconds. And I turned to sort of look down at the boys, was unaware that they were with me because I was so absorbed. And the next thing, I looked up and it was gone.
How low had it been?
It had been the height, I couldn't tell you. But the house that you've seen, it was just on top of the roof. It was hovering on top of the roof.
How big was it compared with the size of the house?
It swallowed the whole circumference of the roof. I couldn't see, the roof was completely blotted out. The chimneys I couldn't see. All I could see was this massive object that I described as like a Mexican hat without the bubbles.
And then it flew away sideways or upwards?
No, I didn't see. I just looked up and it had gone. But I assume it went straight up.
The Hindu Vedas are packed with fantastic stories about the gods, their powers, and epic battles that supposedly took place long ago. Their sagas are widely perceived by post-World War II academia to be mythological stories that were created to be taken as allegory. This sentiment was not shared by nationalist Germany, however, as they sent expeditions all over the world convinced that sacred esoteric texts held ancient knowledge concerning advanced technology from distant antiquity, and that modern man was in a state of amnesia about Earth's true prehistoric history. Ancient Aryan Hindu myths talk of noble gods who fight off wicked forces, flying in craft called vimanas, and, as Oppenheimer alluded to, they portray what to many seem to be nuclear war. The aircraft are described in ancient Hindu Sanskrit texts are flying machines, which they refer to as vimanas, which translates to traversing, and were machines allegedly piloted by their ancient Aryan gods. These flying craft came in all shapes and sizes and could travel at different speeds and distances. Some were land and seafaring vehicles, while others flew in the air, sometimes all the way to the moon or further. On top of every Hindu temple or pyramid one can find a depiction of a vimana, which are often rounded, saucer-like objects that closely resembled the photographs of anti-gravitic craft that were labeled as UFOs during and after World War II, which the US government has recently acknowledged are a real phenomena. Part 1. Base. At the beginning of 1947, yet another expedition by the American explorer Richard Byrd arrived on Antarctic shores. It was a very strange expedition. Unlike his previous three, this one was completely financed by the US Navy. Operation High Jump was its code name. Under the command of Admiral R. Byrd, there was a powerful military squadron, an aircraft carrier, 12 surface ships, 1 submarine, more than 20 airplanes and helicopters, and about 5,000 people on staff. You will agree, a strange team for a scientific expedition. December 2nd, 1946. Before the start of his expedition, Admiral Byrd, at a press conference, said, "My expedition is military in nature," giving no further details. At the end of January 1947, full-scale aerial reconnaissance began surveying the Antarctic region of Queen Maud Land. It all went to plan in the first weeks. Tens of thousands of photos were taken. Suddenly, the inexplicable happened. The 6-month expedition terminated after only 2 months. Fleeing the Antarctica coast, it was a real fast retreat. They lost the destroyer, almost half their carrier-based aircraft, dozens of sailors and officers. The Commission investigation members of the United States Congress, Admiral Byrd, said the following: "In the event of another war, America can be attacked by an enemy that has the ability to fly from pole to pole with incredible speed." What made the Americans flee? In 1945, 18 months before Admiral Byrd's expedition began, 2 German submarines entered Mar del Plata, port in Argentina, surrendering to authorities. These were no ordinary submarines. They were from the so-called Foerster convoy. This was a top-secret fleet fulfilling missions. Details have remained a secret till now. The submarine crews were reluctant to cooperate. Even so, the Americans learned a few things. The commander of U-boat U-530 spoke of his involvement in an operation codenamed Valkyrie 2. 2 weeks before the war's end, the U-boat U-530 left the quay, heading for the shores of Antarctica. On board of the submarine were passengers with faces covered in bandages, as well as Third Reich relics. The commander of another U-boat, U-977, Heinz Sepehr, later testified that he followed the same route. It was found that the German submarines repeatedly followed the Antarctic route. But why go there? Antarctica. Recently, huge underground lakes were found, a kilometer deep under the ice. The lake's temperature is 18 degrees Celsius. Located above the water surface are dome-like vaults filled with warm air. It's possible that from these heated lakes, a constant river of warm water flows into the ocean. For thousands of years, these warm rivers may have formed large underground ice tunnels, perfect for the construction of secret bases. From the ocean's edge, any submarine can easily pass under the coastal ice into these tunnels. Here it was, a complete base, immune from storms and polar cold, totally hidden from outsiders and out of the enemy's reach. Many assumed that in case of a defeat in the war, Antarctica would be a safe haven for the elite of the Third Reich. By 1942, transfer of inhabitants to New Swabia had begun, including scientists, engineers, members and representatives of the Nazi Party and German state. Certain secret industrial technologies were also transferred from Germany. Post-war, the Americans recruited German scientists to work in the United States. but were shocked to find thousands of highly qualified Third Reich specialists had vanished and weren't listed as dead. Over 100 submarines had also vanished, never to be found. Who did these flying saucers belong to? Could it have been the Nazi Germany? Part 2, Ahnenerbe. After the war, in Nazi secret archives, intriguing photos and drawings were discovered. They proved that German scientists were actually engaged in the development of disc-shaped aircraft. At the time, nothing like this existed. How had Nazi scientists managed to make such a technological leap? Ahnenerbe Society, the most mysterious organization in the Third Reich. Even now, the secret services of leading powers hunt for its secrets. But why? It's simple. This was the only known historical structure engaged in the study of the occult and mysticism to have state funding and support. No organization in the world had at its disposal such a volume of data or had such influence on the development of occult technology as the Ahnenerbe. The Ahnenerbe founders were drawn from the highest ranks of the Third Reich. Research on occult knowledge and paranormal phenomena by the Ahnenerbe received blessings from SS Reichsfuhrer Himmler, who not only acted on his own initiative but also with instructions from Adolf Hitler. Officially, the society was founded in 1935 and was intended to explore the historical roots of the German nation. Ahnenerbe, when translated, means legacy of the ancestors. However, the society's scope of interest was broader than ancient German history study. Third Reich leaders understood an army's size wasn't necessary to win future wars. Therefore, they adopted the so-called concept of qualitative superiority. Therefore, one can win a war with relatively low quantitative forces, while utilizing high qualitative forces to provide them with qualitative superiority. The Ahnenerbe brought in specialists in the occult, non-traditional, and paranormal knowledge in order to achieve a breakthrough in an area where their opponents would not be competent. Nazi ideology was based on the theory that in the past there was a powerful Earth civilization with access to secrets of the universe. Somewhere, encrypted and scattered, this higher knowledge was preserved. Specifically, they were tasked with reviving the superhuman in Germany. In their role as an ancient Aryan descendants, they were very interested in Atlantis. Their scientists believed it, the Aryan race's native home. Therefore, Germany was the rightful heir to Atlantean technological knowledge. According to the librarian from one of the Postansky libraries, in March of 1945, he witnessed Soviet troops approaching German territory. The Ahnenerbe were evacuating a library carrying away 140,000 volumes. The library catalog would be very interesting. It's possible the Ahnenerbe learned something incredible about Antarctica. They made the study of this continent one of the main Nazi leadership goals. Actually, the SS were after very specific knowledge. Studies were carried out concerning the paranormal abilities of employees of the Ahnenerbe. The results were recorded on personal files. When the war started, officers with these paranormal abilities, along with others who displayed paranormal skills, were merged into a single Ahnenerbe department. Unfortunately, there are no records on what this department was working on, or more importantly, what results were achieved. One of the main objectives pursued by the Ahnenerbe experts was the use of paranormal abilities to contact unknown beings. Part 3. Saucers. Secret Thule Society members, the Ahnenerbe's predecessor, among the selected were 2 experienced mediums or contactees, as we say today. One of them hides under the mysterious name of Sigrun. The other is Maria Orsic from Zagreb. She speaks of strange things in a trance state, from a civilization in the Taurus constellation. She receives incredible technical information. This knowledge shocked no one. On the contrary, it attracted huge interest, as it concerned the construction of an unusual flying vehicle, which could alter the flow of time around it. A step toward the dream of the secret society, a time machine penetrating deep into history, obtaining the knowledge of ancient high civilizations.
Our guest tonight found out whether there was any land north of the North American continent. He made that first discovery flight, and I must say that Admiral Byrd, our guest tonight, is not only our greatest living explorer, but he's been an inspiration to countless Americans. Admiral Byrd, you've been to both the North Pole and the South Pole. Is there any unexplored land left on this earth that might appeal to adventurous young Americans?
Yes, there is. And not up around the North Pole, because it's getting crowded up there now, because they find out it's really usable, not only to live in, but militarily. But strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being. And that's beyond the pole on the other side of the South Pole from Middle America. And I think it's quite astonishing that there should be an area as big as that unexplored.
That's a tremendous
So
challenge.
there's a lot of adventure left down at the bottom of the world.
There's a significant body of evidence out there that suggests that a significant number, if not all, UFOs come from right here on this planet. And we're going to look at that evidence. There's a book written by Renato Vesco, an Italian author who was in the military, Italian military, during World War II, and he had access to some very interesting files, German files, on German flying disc technology, that the Germans were developing flying discs along with other bizarre aircraft during World War II. And that's what we're going to be looking at. And what developed from that. And some of the UFOs we see today, are they product of that technology?
Well, I would say, through the research that I've done and the people that I've talked to, that the majority of what we see are actually built here on this planet and maintained and flying on this planet.
But the saucers, they were very well guarded, and the Germans were preparing a retreat to the South Pole, especially after 42, when the guys with the brains in Berlin realized that they would lose the war. Anybody who knew the real industrial might of England, Russia, and United States combined realized that, what proved at the end of the war that there were 500,000 Allied planes against 100,000 German planes produced. For every German plane in the air, there were 5 Allied planes. Figures that are not very often discussed in the press. So knowing this, as early as probably 42, 43, the Germans started making tremendous effort to move hundreds of thousands of people to the South Polar colony and to keep the saucer's existence as secretive as possible. At the same time, Renato Vesco, this, he's considered the Italian Werner von Braun, the research and development boss of the Italian Air Force during the war, wrote in his book Intercept But Don't Shoot that there have been dozens of full fighter attacks and Kugelblitz attacks on Allied bomber formations with devastating results that have been documented by the Allied Air Forces.
And now for news of our own West Coast, we take you to Los Angeles and the report of Byron Palmer.
Anti-aircraft guns went into action against unidentified aircraft in the Los Angeles area shortly after 3 a.m. Pacific wartime this morning. The anti-aircraft guns began barking during a blackout ordered by the 4th Interceptor Command at 2:25 a.m. The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach. Army officials declined to comment on the possibility that the object might have been a blimp. However, it required nearly 30 minutes to travel some 25 miles, far slower than an airplane. Watchers on the rooftop of the Columbia Broadcasting Building in the heart of Hollywood could plainly see the flashes of guns and searchlights sweeping the skies in a wide arc along the coastal area. Concussion of the shells could be felt in downtown Los Angeles, 15 miles away. U.S. Army planes quickly took to the dark skies, but whether they contacted the object has not been announced. Army officials say they will not comment until they receive a full report of the action. Although some watchers say they saw airplanes in the air, semi-official sources say they probably were the U.S. Army's pursuit. Several observers say they saw one or more planes spotlighted by 20 or 30 searchlights. The object moved southward, presumably over Huntington Park at the western edge of Los Angeles, and on southward to about Long Beach on the coast. By 3:30 a.m., observers said the object appeared to be over the south of Long Beach. Searchlights closely followed the object down the coast and kept it centered in their glare. Shells frequently could be seen bursting near the object, but none appeared to hit it.
The crafts were named Grill, and Grill in Germanic language means the life force. Basically, craft utilizing the never exhaustible, always automatically replenishable life force. And then in a book on ancient occult, German occult traditions, they had a chart of the runic characters, and this is the runic character for the life force. So it all drives together. The name of the craft, Vril, the meaning of the word Vril, and the pictorial symbol on the bottom all mean the same thing, the life force. So we were able to decipher this little puzzle here. 17 of the Vrils were produced. Quite probably they were tested quietly, low-key testing, and then they were flown to the German South Polar colony. We will talk about it in detail pretty soon. And these are low-level photographs, the first real photographs of such craft in low-level flights over the testing grounds in Germany. It's probably the autumn of 1944. The leaves are gone from the trees. In this photograph, we can see the head of the pilot through the transparent perspex cupola of the craft. A very steep maneuver. Possibly the craft is moving in this direction upward because of all the edges. These and these edges are blurred. This happens usually with the edges, with the attacking and the trailing edge of the craft. This enlarged photograph, we see an even better picture of the pilot inside. These two dark spots here could be the sunglasses that the pilot was wearing. The craft could go 2,900 kilometers in the atmosphere, almost 2 times the speed of sound. It definitely had exoatmospheric and orbital capabilities. And I have a suspicion that these were free energy craft that did not need any fuel to fly. Once they were started and put in motion, I mean their gravity drives were activated, they did not need any more fuel to run. Craft, the Hollywood 2 type craft, which were 25 meter diameter, about 75 meter diameter tank killers, were also produced. They had one big drive, a ball in the middle, which was a tachyon drive, an electromagnetic-gravitic drive, which they were calling the tachyon drives. The Thule tachyonators. The Thule tachyon drives were produced on assembly lines. They had an assembly line production of tachyon drives in their AEG and Siemens plants in 44 and 45. So in these underground caverns, they had more than enough space and fantasy and guts to build all these incredible flying machines. Armaments were added. These are machine guns in 3 turrets.
The German scientists themselves seem to imply that they had help from similar-looking people from other worlds. That is to say, before the Germans allegedly broke away to Antarctica and South America, assuming that indeed took place. These paperclip scientists seem to imply that prior human civilizations either already broke away to colonize space, or maybe we ourselves are the offspring of a prior colonization, meaning we ourselves did not originate on Earth. Humanity having a celestial, non-native origin would make it no longer necessary for desperate anthropologists to do all this mental gymnastics to force obsolete paradigms to work, like out of Africa theory, which involves claims that an ape-like foot with a big toe that sticks out to the angle like a thumb, obviously used for grabbing branches, was actually a bipedal hominin ancestor displayed in many museums. If we did not come down from the trees, where did humanity come from? Turning to myth and folklore, we have stories of people dwelling in subterranean habitats coming to the surface, such as the Hopi Indian legends. And of course, there's no shortage of ancient mythologies and religious stories of some sort of fallen angel or god coming down and mating with earthly or mortal women. From the Book of Enoch to the many stories of Zeus or some other god constantly raping women and their offspring establishing new civilizations, which is how Atlantis allegedly started. The genetic findings seem to make much more sense in terms of an advanced branch of humanity hybridizing with more primitive or less technologically advanced cousins, which might sound implausible to some, but at least starts to solve mysteries such as Rh-negative blood type, which modern traditional Darwinian anthropology has no solution for.
Look at the skull, look at the face. The eye sockets are larger than normal and they're vertically longer. So that is not the depiction of a normal human baby. As well, it has permanent molars. So a so-called 2-year-old baby has the molars of a 10 or 12-year-old. So what I'm starting to insinuate is this is not Homo sapiens sapiens. And then the skull on the right-hand side, its haplogroup turns out to be T2, which again goes back to Europe or Eurasia. And then this one, its mitochondrial haplogroup is H1. It's found through Europe, but the source area is the Black Sea and Crimea. So it's highly unlikely of migration of people across land to Siberia, across the Bering Land Bridge, and all the way down the Americas to the coast of Peru. It's more likely maritime emigration 3000 BC or earlier. So again, another DNA test, the one on the left-hand side, H2A. Source, the Black Sea and Crimea.
Human beings did live on Mars once. They, however, rendered it uninhabitable in a nuclear war. The TikTok video, which has gone viral on social media and shared across platforms, states that the war on Mars could have led to a nuclear winter, which then resulted in the red color of the planet, as per a report in the Newsweek.
John Brandenburg, who's done some studies, he shows that there are isotopes in the atmosphere of Mars, which is indicative of a nuclear war having occurred at some point in Mars history.
I was then investigating Mars. I'm standing in the library at Sandia Labs to get a scientific article on Mars. It was about Mars' atmosphere. And Mars' atmosphere is loaded with a peculiar isotope called xenon-129. And it made it different than any other place in the solar system. It's very different from Earth, the solar wind, the moon, the meteorites, all are very different from Mars in terms of isotopes of xenon. And I mentioned this to this fellow I was standing next to in line, and he said, "Let me see that." And he looked at it, and he had this amazed look on his face, and he said, "Someone nuked them."
Whoa, just like that?
Just like that. And he looked at me, and he said it a second time. "That means someone nuked them."
And he was dead serious.
He was dead serious. And then since we were an unclassified part of the lab, it was just the library, he suddenly said, "Pardon me," and he excused himself. And what that meant is that he had spoken out of school. He had spoken about something classified in an unclassified area, and it was
This is quite a story, and it comes from the man who headed Israel's space security program for nearly 30 years. Chaim Eshed is making the extraordinary claim that the United States and Israel have been in contact with a group of aliens for years, not immigrants, but extraterrestrials. He has called them the Galactic Federation of Aliens, and he says President Trump is aware of the existence of these aliens and had been on the verge of revealing their secrets, he claims, but was asked not to do so by the Federation in order to prevent what he calls mass hysteria. Well, the retired general says the US and Israel have kept it from the public because, quotes, humanity isn't ready and the aliens don't want to reveal themselves until humanity can evolve, he says, and understand what space really is. Well, the good news is that he claims an agreement has been reached between the US government and the aliens, a contract to do experiments here. There's also, he says, a secret underground base on Mars where there are American and alien representatives. Now, this former head of a branch of Israel's defense ministry is 87. He was very well respected. He says he's come forward now in the hope that his news will be accepted as true. He notes that if he'd made these claims 5 years ago, he would have been hospitalized, but now he says, "I've got nothing to lose." Well, so far, President Trump has not tweeted about this, though remember a year ago, he did set up the Space Force as the fifth branch of the US Armed Forces.